Hello, everyone. I'm Mark. I'm joined by Tyler. We're Savvy Coaching, and we're excited to introduce the ultimate preseason blueprint for you. We're going to share our vision over the next 4 weeks to help you dominate the preseason. What we're all about at Savvy Coaching is to set you up to have your best season yet. So, see, we have a number of coaches live here with us. If you don't mind, just tell us where you're from. Maybe tell us what your big goal is for your team this preseason, because we want this to be interactive. We'll answer some mailbag questions in a little bit, and we will take your questions here live too. To start, Tyler, I have a question for you. Speaking
Let's
of the
go.
preseason, what would you say is the biggest miss for coaches? And what I mean by that, in the preseason, maybe where do they direct their attention to that they shouldn't, or where should they direct their attention and they're not?
Yeah. Okay. Can't wait to answer that one. Let me first say I'm just thrilled all of the coaches that are choosing to join us here live. We haven't done a live webinar in a minute. We've been doing our recorded podcasts weekly, which have been getting great engagement and great questions. So thank you to our coaches that are showing on live. I know Mark will give some shout outs here in a moment, but also a thank you to everyone that's choosing to watch this recorded. Our goal with Savvy Coaching is we want to spend a year with you as a coach and help you grow over that year, grow more than you've ever thought possible. And that's why we call our primary membership Savvy Grow, because I know that myself, I know it's true for Mark, when we have got around mentors and coaches that have poured into us, we've grown like crazy. And I know it's true for myself. When I isolate myself and just keep my eyes down on knocking off the next thing on my checklist, that's when I stagnate and get frustrated and question, what am I even doing and why am I doing it? It's way more fun to go on a journey together. And that's what a cohort is. A cohort is a group that's traveling together. You don't get into a cohort to stand still, right? You jump into a cohort, you jump into a group to go somewhere. And where we're going this month, every month we go somewhere else as a group. We move forward as a group. And this month, we're moving forward. We're going to execute on a resource that Mark has put together and used. He was walking me through it. And the level of detail and thought, Mark, that you've put in to your preseason blueprint and all of your years of coaching is so valuable. So I just want to celebrate you on that and share, before I answer this question, the longest non-answer that I think I've ever had. Before I answer this question, just like say, this is such a valuable resource for coaches. And I know everyone that joins us on the cohort is going to get your entire spreadsheet checklist. You're going to share a little bit of that later. But let me now, after I didn't answer your question, and let me share with you blind spots that we have as coaches that keep us from being successful in our preseason. I would say these are the 4 blind spots that keep us from being effective and efficient in establishing the vision for our preseason. And we'll work through these in a moment, but here it is. 4 big blind spots. 1, we prepare for players over people, meaning we think about how someone's going to perform on the court for our team more than we think about the person that they are and developing and connecting and caring for that person. Oh, we got a great shooter this year. We got a big this year. We got a really fast player this year. Oh, this player's coming back a lot stronger. They put on about 15 pounds of muscle. And that thinking is the sign of a transactional coach. And as we're trying to grow, and we're on a mission here at Savvy to grow ourselves and to help you grow, we're trying to grow from being transactional only to transformational, to transform the people that we have the opportunity to lead, not just as basketball players. Obviously, that's very important. That's going to happen. That's what we're experts at. We don't have to be reminded to transform them as basketball players, but we do need to be reminded to transform them as people as well. So big miss, thinking of them as players over people. And even if we only care about the transaction of players, give me your effort, give me your sweat, give me your skill, and then I can get a win or a championship or an accolade or a success. Even if we were just transactional, I think that it would benefit you to think of them as people over players. Because when you only see them as players, you're only going to get what they currently can give. But when you start to see them as people and you develop them as leaders and you teach them how to be intrinsically motivated and you share with them what it means to be on a journey of mastery, well, when you think of them as people, they become the best version of themselves as a player as well. But when you just think of them as a player, you see very little growth. And we're all about growth here at Savvy. Okay, that's the first mistake. Mark, I saw the many moments where you had a thought to respond to there. So go ahead.
Yeah, what resonated with me is when you said we see them as players first, people second, is we see them as vehicles or obstacles, right? Like we have a shooter this year. He or she are going to help us win more games, or he or she they're not a good defender, so they're an obstacle to our winning. Instead of, like you said, seeing them as people first, we coach people that play basketball, right?
Mm.
So I think that's a really important reminder for coaches. I love where that is because better people make better basketball players. So a transformational coach will pour into people. They look to give instead of get, knowing that if we're developing people that are intrinsically motivated, like you said, we're building the right habits, we're building the right mindset to set them up for their life after basketball. It's only going to make them better basketball players in the meantime. So our purpose, we play for a purpose higher than winning, right? Winning can be the goal, but our purpose on why we coach should be much higher than that.
Man, I love vehicles or obstacles. Um, Man, that hits home so hard and clarifies thing, I think, for so many of us as coaches. And before I go into the second one, welcome to all of you that put a hello in the chat. Great to see some familiar names. We got Texas in the house, Maryland, Ohio, a Reds fan. I hear Reds is a team that participates with sticks and balls and attempts to do something with those. Yeah, I hope they get a hit tonight for you as well. Tucson, Arizona, close to home. Love it. And and many new Grow members. Please continue as you join to drop where you are in the world in the chat, where you have the opportunity to serve and coach. And as always, any questions you have that come up at any time, we'll see if we can work them in. We've got a lot of mailbag questions from our community. Okay, let's share as you. And again, this is the ultimate preseason blueprint. A blueprint helps you build something. You can't build a house without clearing the land, right? You can't build a house without taking down the trees, leveling off the dirt, removing any big rocks that might be in the way. So these are the four biggest mistakes, and they're all mistakes of removing obstacles to building a beautiful house, structure, whatever. So the error is just starting to build without removing barriers to success. And so the first barrier to success is seeing them as players, your team as players instead of people. Okay, here is the second barrier to success that I've observed. Establishing rules instead of standards. Establishing rules instead of standards. I'll give a quick example of this because language matters, and we probably all bring different definitions to what a rule is or what a standard is. And if you've journeyed with us at Savvy, you've probably heard the language of standards, but maybe it hasn't dropped all the way from your head to your heart yet. I'll give an example of this. I was recently at a coaching clinic, and there was a presenter that was doing a wonderful job, and I engaged in a discussion because I think that there was some nuance to this rules versus standards discussion that this presenter was presenting on. And the presenter was asking coaches to break up into tables and talk about what he called their standards. And as soon as he said, I want you to share the standards that you have for your program. And immediately I participated. I was at a table, and the coaches at our table started sharing things like, well, if you miss a practice, you miss a game. And I would, and many things like that, right? And if you don't keep your grades up, you are suspended. Or if you are late to a practice, you run these special and terrible things that they had for running. I can't remember what he called them, right? Or if you miss a layup, it's 10 push-ups. These were things that began to be shared as standards. And I would offer up that here at Savvy, we define standards and rules very differently. Rules are consequences, right? You achieve this thing, or we're going to give you this consequence or punishment. Okay, that's a rule. Where and it's like if you don't do this, then you get this. That's not a standard. A standard elevates. A rule, a standard elevates your ceiling. A rule just raises your floor, right? Like it's like, okay, the rule establishes we're all going to be at practice on time. Okay. But it doesn't say anything about if we have a desire to be great, we might actually get there early. And how early would we get there? Well, as great as we want to be, right? So a standard is an excellence that we're attempting to achieve, whereas a rule is a consequence for behaviors to avoid. And I think too often in the preseason, we're thinking about what, well, here's all the things that frustrated me last year. I'm going to put in a whole bunch of rules and a whole bunch of consequences. I'm not put up with that crap anymore. And when you do that, I think that's a mistake and an obstacle that will limit the top end growth for your team.
Really good. I will say this: what you described as a rule would be more transactional, right? You broke a rule, so I run you. Now we're even. That's a very transactional process.
Yeah.
Standards are built more on transformational coaching or discipline, and that would help develop character. It would actually strengthen the relationship because you're showing that you care about that person, and they're capable of achieving high standards. So you're going to hold them to those high standards, and it also encourages buy-in. And I
Mm-hmm.
know, listening to this as a coach, that's what we all want, right? And that's what we're
Mm-hmm.
getting to in this blueprint. Here's my biggest miss, kind of related. My biggest miss that I have found in coaches, and I've been guilty of this as well, is not knowing where to direct their attention in the preseason. As a
Mm-hmm.
coach, whether you're an assistant coach or a head coach, you wear so many hats, right? You're the fundraiser, you are the social media director, you do the laundry, you have to reach out to the community, all the things that going into being a head coach, we know. And what everybody else sees is the X's and O's, but it's much more than that. So we have a million things that we have to do in the off season or the preseason. What should I be doing right now? My team has 100 things that we can improve upon. What should we be working on as a team when we do have our gym time, or how much should we lift? What does our conditioning look like? And we try to chase so many rabbits that we catch none, right? Like, one of my favorite things I've heard is like, if you could go to every bus stop in the city and wait for 5 minutes and never catch a bus, or you could go to one and sit there all day and you're guaranteed to catch a bus. So, right. So can we shrink our objectives? Can we be laser focused on what we want to accomplish in the preseason? And that's what we're hoping that we can do with our cohort this month. I'll share a resource here that we shared with you in April. So we gave you an off-season identity checklist, and what this checklist was more an evaluation tool for you. Let's look at our program as a whole. What are we doing well? What do we need to improve on? And we asked for you and your assistant coaches to look at this list and just do a simple evaluation and everything. What we're trying to do this month, what our goal is to give you a blueprint for you to plan your season. So if we identified um, areas of growth, right, what we're going to do over the next 4 weeks in our cohort is help you develop a plan. Tyler mentioned excellence when he was talking about how early should we get to a gym. If we're a player that wants to play to a really high standard, or excellence is the value, so we don't want to improve. I'll share this with you here, Tyler. I'm kind of getting ahead of us here, but this is our blueprint. We're going to cover over the next 4 weeks all aspects of your program. Really, we're what, 15 minutes into the call today, and we've only talked culture, and that's how important it is. Both of our misses were more culture or operational, not so much basketball. Trust me, we'll get to plenty of basketball, but I think misses is only focused on basketball and not your culture or operations. Tyler mentioned a checklist and the resource that we're going to share with everybody who joins our cohort. I'm going to go ahead and share that now because I have a couple things I want to touch on, and then we will get into our mailbag section, which we cover every week on our podcast. The resource that's going to come up here in a second for you is part of your blueprint. It's a checklist that will um, define your program. And what it's going to do is establish a higher standard for your baseline performance, and it's going to protect you from failure. What our goal is by sharing this checklist with you is there's no more, well, I forgot to do that. So now I have to stop all of the important things that I was going to do and take care of this because now this becomes really, really urgent. I feel like one of my strengths as a coach was just being organized, and it was out of necessity, right? Like we all have blind spots. So read a book called The Checklist Manifesto, and it really inspired me to get really, really organized so I didn't miss anything in the off season, in the preseason, or in season. But I wanted to pull this up now because we have our culture operating system, which gives you a checklist for how you can implement your culture, but also a way to establish your culture in a step by step process. And Tyler mentioned um, vision, or in our vision for your season, Tyler mentioned excellence, right? Like if our vision is for you to be a standards coach versus a rule based coach, Tyler mentioned excellence. And I wanted to talk about this for a second. Excellence would be the value. We all have our core values. What we hope to do with these checklists is allow you to bring these values to life by creating standards that identify a behavior that we can measure and help bring our players to. So if maybe the value is excellence in your program, the standard could be Kaizen, right? We're constantly looking to improve. So our behavior could be that we get in extra work before or after training sessions, and that we crave feedback because we know that's going to help us improve and for us to strive to excellence. So wanted to take a second and introduce this checklist here. We also have our calendar. I think this is important, give you a kind of an overview of your year so you can be intentional about your scheduling, whether it's practice or games. So we have got a ton of resources for you here that'll help you have your best season yet. And we're going to shift. Tyler, anything on that shift to the mailbag?
All right. Yes, let me play off of the standard of Kaizen that you just gave as an example, because we do have a question in the chat asking for an example of a standard for a team to help versus a rule. So let me lean into the standard of Kaizen. So Kaizen is a Japanese term that that is defined as continuous improvement by incremental changes over time. That's Kaizen, continuous improvement. So if we collectively established and agreed that Kaizen was the standard for our team, well, then that would show up as a commitment, and it would show up as players not just attending practice at the start, but I'm going to come 10 minutes early to improve my whatever it is, free throw shooting, whatever. The opposite of a standard then would be a rule. And a rule would be this. You have to make, and I think this is a rule that I've observed many times. I've been on teams that have this rule. You have to make 100 free throws every week or else you don't play. Or you have to shoot 500 threes per week or you can't shoot threes in games. Okay, those would be examples of rules. Now, obviously, rules attempt to uphold standards, but I think that they are more transactional in nature. So if we have a standard of Kaizen, then the more that we can be above the line with our standard, and the more that we can teach, encourage, and disciple our team and players and coaches to what it looks like to be above the line of the standard, above the line of Kaizen, then they will show up early. They will shoot 100 free throws. They will shoot 500 threes. They will get in the weight room. They will get more sleep. They will eat better, right? Because this is how we achieve and get above the line on our standard. So it's really just what side of the room you want to look at it from, right? You want to look at it from one side of the room, which is do this or else rule, or do you look at it from the other side of the room, which is this is the expectation of excellence, and here's how we get above it together, right? So actually, I shouldn't use the analogy of side of the room. I would actually think this is more accurate. Are you looking down at the players that you're leading, right? Or are you looking up at the players that you're leading? Are you working with them to elevate? Or are you looking down at them and saying, come up to my level? I would say that would be the main difference between a standard and a rule, where the outcomes that we're attempting to achieve are similar, maybe the same. How we're achieving those outcomes are different.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I'll say this. So a standard would be your guideline or your expectation, right, for your players. So a value that a lot of teams have would be unity or teamwork, right? Kind of the same thing. A standard could be we prioritize team success over individual achievements. That's not a rule. That is guideline that we would want our players to operate from. So if there's ever a choice where you need to choose between what's best for you or what's best for the team, we expect you to choose what's best for the team because that's our standard. So that is an overview of our blueprint. We kind of got into the checklist a little early there, but I think whether you're a first-year head coach, veteran coach, it doesn't matter. The preseason is a critical time for any basketball program because you're going to lay the foundation for your team's culture, your style of play, and then how you're going to develop your players and your staff. Tyler, do you want to kind of take us through our outline of how we're going to do that over the next 4 weeks?
Yeah. So in our first week, which we're going to be kicking off next week, we're going to talk about how you establish your vision for your preseason. How do you go from 100 things to 10? And how do you clarify that vision? And there's many pieces to that vision, but one of the primary pieces that we'll actually share one tool with you, one piece of value right now, is how do we play, right? So what's our style of play? And so the way that we would suggest you do this, and this would be a tool, is as you think about how we play, think about principles over plays. So a lot of times when a coach is, okay, how are we going to play? Well, I want to run this. That would be a play, right? Like I want to run Princeton, or I want to run Read and React, or I want to run Race in Space, or I want to run Drive in Space, or I want to run Rose Series, okay? And you think, okay, well, that's how we play. No, that's your plays. Those are your actions. That's not how you play. Instead, you want to think about the principles of play, of how you want your team to play. So, like Mark, what would be some examples of principles of play that you have established in your preseason blueprints before?
Oh, principal play would be spacing for us, right? Like we really value spacing. So a lot of our questions on offense or defense, if we're trying to make a decision on how we should defend this or what actions we should run, what should our alignment be, the answer can always be spacing, right? Like what gives us the optimal spacing? Or another principle of play could be ball movement. So we really value ball movement. So that's going to help govern, or that's going to help us make our decisions. What I always think of when I think of principles is we make one decision in the preseason now, and that eliminates 100 decisions later. So if we really value spacing, we shouldn't do anything that hurts our spacing offensively or anything that allows the other team to play with spacing if we're on defense. What about you?
Yeah.
You hear principle of play. What do you think?
Yeah. So I'll flip it to the defensive side and offer up these. And, as you journey more with savvy coaching, you'll find that our offensive and defensive systems are just products of our beliefs around principles of play. They're not systems or valuable in and of themselves, but rather they're a system to implement principles of play. That's it. So, Mark's system of driving space as an outcome, is a way to achieve the principle of spacing wins, right? And so that's what it is. So I'll flip to the other side of the ball for you. And one of the principles on defense that we would establish, and Mark's giving you some examples here. One of the principles on defense that we would establish is we want to take away our butts, right hand drives, breakaways, uncontested threes, and the things they want most. So those are our principles. Now, how do we do it? Well, there's many ways to do it. The lock left is built to do those things. But when we don't know what to do, which happens many times during the season, when in doubt, zoom out, right? Zoom out from your plays or your systems and zoom out to your principles of play. And here's a little tip and why principles are so valuable to us as a coach. And in this preseason blueprint, we will, in week one, we'll help you establish at least one principle of play for your season. Ideally, you will have more than one, but at least one principle of play. And as a coach, especially, we're getting so many new coaches, youth coaches, or coaches coming from to a whole new savvy perspective on coaching. They're like, I don't even know where to start. And then you look at your team and you're like, okay, well, this is ugly. We aren't defending well. And so what tool do we have? And most of the tools that traditional coaches have, let's say for defense, all right, would be, well, let's just go to shell, right? Well, what we're offering up from a principled approach is you don't actually have to have the answers. I was just working with a few hundred coaches here in Manila over the past couple of days, and one of the most profound things that I think we discovered together were like the three most powerful words you can say as a coach. I'm pausing for effect right now as I want everyone to think about what would your answer be? What are the three most powerful words you can say as a coach?
I have a
Mark,
guess.
you have a guess? Okay, go ahead.
I think you already said it, but I'll say I don't know.
You're correct. Okay, I may have already said it. Okay, three most powerful words you can say as a coach when they're like, "What do we do here?" I don't know. It's if you can embrace that as a coach, you're on your journey to becoming a principled coach. Because amazing things happen when you say, "I don't know." One, you normalize not knowing and discovering. And if you, as the leader, like who you're supposed to have all the answers, you say, I don't know, then it's okay for players to now start to ask questions and say, I don't know either, coach. Most players spend most of their time afraid of asking a question of their coach because they don't want the coach to think that they're stupid, slow, or be judged and lose playing time. But when you can normalize that, then all of a sudden you can engage in actual dialogue and you could problem solve together. Two, it connects you. It connects you. When you show vulnerability as a coach and say, I don't know something, you earn more trust and more connection than you ever could by having all the answers. And then the last thing, when you say, I don't know, you then allow everyone to understand that there are multiple ways and multiple solutions to doing things. And then they can maybe come up with something you could never come up with yourself as a coach. So if you say, I don't know, but remember, we're trying to take away right hand drives, go figure out a way to do it, they might come up with a solution that you could have never dictated off the jump. So that would be an example of establishing principles over plays.
Yeah. And I was sharing a document that I made. If you're a member of Savvy or familiar with us, you know that my last coaching stop was at App State University, and I put together a game model for us. And it basically clearly identified our style of play on both sides of the ball. Um, we will help you do that in establishing your play. Like Tyler said, we'll help you establish at least a principle of play, but then create alignment there. So this is our vision. This is the way we want to play. So what principles are really important? How does that determine what our skill development plan is? And then what are our offensive concepts look like or our defensive concepts look like? Because you're exactly right, Tyler. I'll talk to coaches sometimes. I'm like, hey, what do you run offensively? They're like 5 out. I'm like, what does that mean? That could mean a lot of things. I've run 5 out too, but I bet we don't run the same thing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm looking forward to week one where we really dive into the vision, and that could be culture. Like here's how I would ask coaches to think about their vision and maybe have some answers to this as you join us in the cohort. If you put on film of your team in March of next year, what do you want to see? That could be your style of play. Do you want to see an up tempo team? Do you want to see a team that's locking left, that's rebounding and running? Do you want a team that has a lot of touches? Right? They're celebrating their teammates from the bench. They run on and off the floor. They're really connected with their coaches. Uh, that should be your first order of establishing your vision for next season. So think culture, think style of play. That's what we're going to cover on week one. Tyler?
Cool. All right, let's go into week two. And we got a whole bunch of mailbag questions about this stuff, but we don't have time to get into them right now, but we will get into them both in this cohort and in our ongoing weekly podcast, The Hours. Please continue to send these in. The amount of engagement in our community is thrilling, honestly. I love it. Okay, let's talk week two. Week two, we're going to talk about player and staff development. And let me ask you first, Mark, then I'll give my quick thoughts on this one. And of course, there's no way we can get through all of this stuff in a single webinar. That's why we take a whole month to journey through it, provide feedback, and answer your questions in our cohort. Mark, what is one actionable tool that everyone can take away right now to help them have better player and staff development as they plan in their preseason?
Sorry, repeat that question again. One actionable tool for what?
Yeah, in their preseason to have better player development or better staff development. What's one thing that they can begin to plan to do in their preseason here?
Oh, identify roles, both for staff and players. Um, Based on our strengths, based on our blind spots, how do we make the sum greater than the parts? So if that's the players on the floor, can we provide them simplicity, clarity in their role and help them improve in that role? But also, something that I got from you that I really love is can we give them the next thing too? Right. So this is your role based on
Yeah.
what you bring to the team. And then here's our vision for you going forward in the program. I think that's super important for your players and your staff. Talking misses in the preseason, I think this is just a miss all around by coaches. We focus so much on developing players that we don't develop our staff as well. So I take that same approach with my staff.
Yeah. High clarity leads to high performance. Huge miss is just, oh, I hired a coach. They're going to show up and do a great job. Poor leadership, very poor leadership in the small things and the big things. I had about 25 coaches helping me with a player clinic last night. Coaches that had just gone through our coaching workshop. We start working. 25 coaches were standing on the sideline with their cell phones recording what was happening on the court. 25 of them. And we invited these coaches to come be a part of the player clinic. And by be a part, they showed up and started videotaping or filming. Videotape. We don't do that anymore. Recording on their phones, right? And then I stopped and I said, every coach in the gym, meet me at the center. They all came to the center. They started recording me. And I said, here is your job. For the next 10 minutes, you must get as many high fives and pieces of encouragement with players for the rest of this progression. Go. All of a sudden, the entire gym changed. Just because I gave them a job, they went from observer to active participant. That's roles, right? Give someone clarity and they can perform. But when they feel confused with little expectation, they will always disappoint. That's why role clarity and you can't come up with it in the moment. Like in the preseason, part of your blueprint is player role, coach role, and communicate that role. But you can't communicate if you haven't given it a lot of thought.
Yeah, I'll give an actionable tip on that. We did this as a staff, and when we did it, I wish we'd have done it more. But when we did it, we had our best practices ever. Before practice, we'd get in a circle as a staff and establish a goal or a victory for our practice success criteria, just like that. I'm going to get 50 high fives today. I'm going to make sure I get around and I coach every player individually at some point. I'm going to have really good eye contact today. Whatever it was all behavior driven, nothing to do with X's and O's. We always had our best practice because every coach had a very clear role with how we were going to coach and connect with our players.
Beautiful. That's going to be a great week. I can't wait for week 2 for role clarity. And really, my favorite part that we get to go through is like the coaches that can get on live each week, and they just come. They say, "All right, here's my staff. Here's their experience. I have no idea what roles to assign them," and we get to co-create that. Like I love the specificity that we're able to develop on the cohort, and I really look forward to that. As opposed to go from just like general advice to like direct consulting. That's what's so much fun for me. Okay, week 3, we're going into in the ultimate preseason blueprint. How do you plan tryouts, and how do you plan practices? This really is going to go into what we do. Okay, let me, Mark, I'm going to give just an idea for tryouts. Is there anything you want to share before I just give a general idea for tryouts? It's maybe a little bit out of the box.
I know your idea is going to be out of the box.
Okay.
I don't have anything too special for tryouts other than my advice would be treat it as much like a practice as you can, so you can see how players take coaching, how quickly they can apply it. Make it games based. I think you're gonna you're gonna be inclined to want to do a lot of drills so you can do evaluation of their quote unquote skill. Make it games based approach so you can see what they do in live play and can they take feedback? Do they crave feedback? And can they apply it in a game? So that would be my suggestion. Treat it like a practice. In our practice, we're games based.
Beautiful. Okay, and we're going to get into practice planning way more in the actual cohort. So let's just give you today an idea for tryouts because it's the first thing that you're probably going to do. All right, Mark, make it like practice and make it games based. My idea hits one of those two and completely does the opposite on the other one. Okay, it's games based, but it is nothing like practice. Let me give you a couple of data points here that have helped me arrive at this idea. My basketball first and primary mentor, who is now passed away, is a guy by the name of Dick DiVenzio. And he first became my basketball mentor through his book, Stuff Good Players Should Know. Stuff Good Players Should Know has developed the way I think about, teach, played, and now coach basketball more than any other single book or person in the world. Dick DiVenzio. Dick DiVenzio started Point Guard College. I attended Point Guard College with Dick DiVenzio. And when I showed up, I had only been coached one way. And when I showed up, he coached me in a completely opposite way, and it changed my whole trajectory of how I played in career. I mean, he didn't even coach. He wore sombreros to the gym. He would explain a game we were supposed to play, and then he'd sit down in a chair and start reading a book and say, "If you guys want to get better, you'll figure it out." Like, it was mind-boggling to me. I fell asleep in class, and he came and sat on my lap to wake me up. Like, it was ludicrous to me, right? It shocked me out of the status quo and introduced me to like a playful, joyful way to engage with the game of basketball. He also had this idea that never came to fruition. He wanted to establish leagues all across the world, but North America first, playing a completely different type of basketball. And he called it Meta Magical Basketball League is what he was going to call it. It never actually happened. And it completely changed the rules of the game for youth, for young players, to make it completely crazy and fun with rules that would develop them long term and not the rules that would actually maybe steal their joy, like shooting on 10-foot hoops and getting called for travels all the time. Anyway, in line with that, I think tryouts are a time of great stress for so many players. I think that many teams that we work with actually already know who's going to make the team and who's going to be on what team going into tryouts. They're pretty much useless. You're just trying to look for data to back up the decision that you've already made for 2 to 3 players that you might have to cut, or 2 to 3 players that you might have to put on a lower team than you want to. And you're just trying to find data points to support the decision you've already made. So you're not really doing tryouts anyway. And lastly, I think that tryouts are dreaded and cuts are dreaded by coaches. I've heard this from coaches so many times. This is the absolute worst part of coaching for me. Okay, so flip the script in line with metamagical basketball. What if you did and named it crazy? What if this was the highlight of your season? What if this was the thing that every player and every coach looked forward to the most in your season? This is before cuts. This is before the grind of the season. Everyone gets to play. It doesn't matter what team you're on. You do like the Olympiad of basketball over 2 or 3 days. And you have all these different tournaments. You have prizes. You play music. You do crazy stuff. You have one-on-one champions, 3-on-3 champions, shooting champions, finishing champions. You do our basketball decathlon. You got a decathlon champion, right? You do boat races. You do random selection. You do captains. You make all of the freshman captains. Like, what if you did a bunch of crazy fun games? So it's games based, like you said, Mark, but it's just a fun celebration. It's a way that you induct and introduce people into your program and your culture. It's inclusive of everyone. And after that, you already have your decisions made up, but you'll probably see more in there that you need to see to make decisions because they're playing a lot of basketball. And coming out of it and be like, thank you so much for being a part of our Olympiad this year. It was a pleasure to get to be in the gym with you. We don't have a spot for you on our team, but I'm really glad you got to experience this amazing opportunity and you make it fun. I think that will soften the blow for the worst conversations. You already know the right conversations, and it can be something that everyone in your program looks forward to as a highlight instead of something to dread.
Yeah, and the players that don't make the team, like you said, still a good experience, right? And that's probably that might be their last basketball
It
experience.
might be their last basketball experience.
Awesome. I love it, man. You know what
Cool.
it sounds like? It sounds meta magical.
It sounds meta magical. Shout out Dick DeVinzio. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week, or the last week of the cohort, week 4, we're going to take you through basically game management. So we've done all of these step by step. The weeks, we have our vision for our culture, our style of play. We have our process for developing our players, our staff, our tryouts, our practice planning. How the heck do we get all of this to transfer into games? Tyler, I don't expect you to answer that all on this webinar today, but when you think of that, what comes to mind first?
It's a marathon, not a sprint. I think another obstacle that hurts us here is we establish goals over processes. Too much focus on the outcome. The only way that you can do that heavy lift is to put processes in place that over the long run will move you along your path. As opposed to just saying like we have to force the goal to happen. We have to force the fruit to happen. And so one specific process to establish, and in fact, I'll even go back to this, John Wooden, who may be the best coach of all time. There's a great argument for that. John Wooden gave us the blueprint for this, and he said, spend more time on processes. For an example, he just sat his players down and taught them how to tie their shoes. Now, one would think, oh, what a waste of time. You have limited practice time trying to go win championships, and you're like telling players how to tie their shoes. Like they've been tying their shoes for 20 years. How do you put your socks on? And I think there's two parts to this. Like one, it's very practical. Like at that point, there wasn't a lot of really high-end footwear or ankle taping or ankle braces, and an ankle injury would knock out a player, and that would really derail their entire season. So how, or if you got a blister or whatever. So he's like, this is how we put on our socks and shoes. And we're going to spend time on this process to avoid injury. So if you think about it that way, like what's your process for injury avoidance? Okay. Also, he just said, I'm going to establish a process by which I establish that process is important to us, right? We will spend more time, and I would encourage you in this, and we'll identify the processes in the cohort for you or help you identify yours. You should spend more time at the beginning of the season on process. And though it will take longer to establish those processes, by the end of the season, those processes will buy you more time than you've ever had before to do other things. And so that's really what we're trying to do with game management, timeout management, pre-practice processes, travel processes, game day processes, jersey processes, all the processes that need to be put in. You actually have processes so that you can have freedom of time. A lot of times people think that processes are like very confining and putting you in jail, but actually process creates freedom.
Yeah. If you think about it, goals are I don't want to say pointless, but everybody's goal is to win the district or conference title or to win a state championship. It's really the processes are going to which lead to the results that you want. Goals are very result oriented. Process is about the system and the step by step process to get you there. Um, I've heard the analogy of an assembly line. Like whatever, if you're a high school coach, your varsity basketball team is the end product of all of your processes. So if a system or a process might be goal is to win a championship. What we need to focus on, what we will over the next 4 weeks, is how we recruit. How do we manage our assistant coaches? How do we build our skill? How do we conduct practice? Those are all processes along the way. So if you genuinely care about the goal, you'll really focus on the process, which is what we're going to help you do over the next 4 weeks. Tyler, anything to wrap this up with before we hop off? I know we're at time here.
Absolutely. I hope that every one of you that is a Grow member really prioritizes this preseason blueprint cohort with us. I hope that anyone that's not currently a Grow member chooses to give us a chance to help you grow this month. I just dropped a link into the chat. If you're not currently a Grow member, I would encourage you to consider signing up. Not only do you get to spend live training with us this month, but you get access to our entire classroom of all of our resources, drill book, race and space, lock left, rose series, all of it. And you get the opportunity to send us in film for us to give you film feedback and continue to coach you. So please join us as a Grow member this month. Please join us on our cohort this month. We do it because we believe it serves. For those of you that just joined on the webinar, I trust that this served you as well. And thank you for taking time to either watch live or to watch recorded. Until next time, I'm Tyler. That's Mark. He's Mark. We're Savvy Coaching, and we can't wait to spend more time with you.
Stay savvy.
Stay savvy.